All right, folks. Thank you for joining Tyrant Slayer Studios. We are here this evening to talk about the 10th Amendment. We are joined here by Activism News Network's finest, Mr. Majorly Awesome, a.k.a. Rogue Nation, Eyes on the State, and we will be joined by John Filax as well. Evidently, he's running a little late this evening, but here we are. We are live. How's the audio? Everybody hear me okay? Let's get these guys in the
5x5.
stream. Yeah, buddy. How we doing this night? This evening, you guys. Eyes on the State, Major League.
Pretty good.
Excellent.
Pretty good also, yes.
Excellent. Audio's okay on my end. You guys sound great. I guess we shall proceed. The 10th Amendment is what brings us here this evening. We're going to take a rather close look, I suppose, at the 10th Amendment and its history, what it means for the relationship between the federal government and the states, and how it impacts us in 2020. I do have a piece here I pulled up at justialaw.com, and I am going to start just simply by reading some annotations. Quote, "The 10th Amendment was intended to confirm the understanding of the people at the time the Constitution was adopted. The powers not granted to the United States were reserved to the states or the people. It added nothing to the instrument as originally ratified." Quote, end quote. The amendment states, but a truism that all is retained which has not been surrendered. Wow, this is hard to read. There is nothing in history of its adoption to suggest that it was more than declaratory of the relationship between the national and the state governments, as it had been established by the Constitution before the amendment, or that its purpose was other than to allay fears that the new national government might seek to exercise powers not granted, and that the states might not be able to exercise fully their reserved powers, quote unquote. That this provision was not conceived to be a yardstick for measuring the powers granted to the federal government or reserved to the states was firmly settled by the refusal of both House of Congress to insert the word, quote unquote, expressly before the word, quote unquote, delegated, and was confirmed by Madison's remarks in the course of the debate, which took place while the proposed amendment was pending, concerning Hamilton's plan to establish a national bank. Interference with the power of the states was no constitutional criterion, tomato, of the power of Congress. If the power was not given, Congress could not exercise it. Nevertheless, for approximately a century, from the death of Marshall until 1937, the 10th Amendment was frequently invoked to curtail powers expressly granted to Congress, notably the powers to regulate commerce, to enforce the 14th Amendment, and to lay and collect taxes. I guess we'll stop that there. If you folks have not heard of Rogue Nation, that is very unfortunate. You will have an opportunity to hear this extremely bright mind speak this evening. I'm sure he's got a wonderful take on the 10th Amendment, and he can translate what I've just read for you and put it into terms that are much more understandable to the average American. And at this time, I'd like to give the floor to the Commander-in-Chief himself, Mr. Majorly Awesome. If you could just kind of introduce yourself and give the people your take on the 10th Amendment and how it affects us today, what its original purpose was, the intent behind it and things, and if you see any sort of problems with it, any sort of good or any sort of bad in it, I'd like you to express what you believe that to be, or what you know that to be, for the people as diligently and thoroughly as possible. It would be great. So you could take the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. Can everybody hear me?
Throw one in the chat if you got good audio on Mr. Major Lee.
I can't see the chat, so I'll rely on you guys.
Yeah, let's take a look here. I'm going to bring up the chat now. Hang on. Make sure everybody can hear you.
I can hear you quite fine on my side, so I would assume it would be out also good.
Okay. All right. Well, first, I want to start by telling everybody thanks for being here, of course, and thank you for having me here, Tyrant Slayer. Eyes on the State, thank you, sir, for being here as well. The 10th Amendment is one that's, overlooked a lot. And the reason being is because there were no specific rights talked about in that amendment. It's kind of vague in the fact that it reserves these other rights to us, but no one has, pontificated on those rights. And basically, what it means for us today is that now part of our civil rights can come from case law. What the Supreme Court says is a right of the citizens based on their interpretation of the Constitution, of the founders' intents, and those kind of things. But I want everybody to look at this and understand that the Constitution has never and is not a contract between, per se, me and the federal government. It's a contract between the states as our representatives and the federal government. And it's basically an outline of what the federal government is allowed to do. Now, in the 10th Amendment, when it says that the rights that haven't been given to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people, we have to realize that the people that they're talking about when it says the people is the political entity, we the people, which has never been seen in our lifetime. It actually has never been seen at all because we've always dealt through representatives. We the people specifically means each and every one of us. Okay, so we're all, I guess you could say, a part of the whole. We're each a hair on an arm, I guess you could say, in that respect. So basically, the 10th Amendment is reserving those rights to the states because, again, the people don't exist as a political entity anywhere, just through our representatives, through state legislatures and the federal legislature. So it really miffs a lot of people with that, because everybody's like, well, we're we the people. And while that's true, it's also not true. A hair on the arm is a hair on the arm, but it isn't the arm. So while we all make up a part of we the people, no one person himself or herself is actually we the people. It's all of us together. So, it's just, I want to say, another mystery that is the Constitution to me, because a lot of the rights and privileges and immunities that they give us in the Constitution, there's always what I like to call a government take back clause. And
A roadblock of sorts, if you will.
right. And I don't want to get too far off the subject of the 10th Amendment, but when I point it out, you're going to recognize it immediately. And that is, for example, there shall be no involuntary servitude unless it's for a crime. Well, who decides what are crimes? The government. There shall be no private property taken without just compensation. Well, who figures out what's just compensation? The government. So, in a lot of these clauses in the Constitution that we imagine gives us this freedom, if you look close, there's always a clause in there for the government to supersede that freedom. So, with the 10th Amendment, I mean, I find it to be no different. With the word trickery of the rights being reserved to the people, because they're not reserved to the people. They're not reserved to the individual person me or you or eyes on the state. They're reserved to a political entity that in no way can ever exist because it would be impossible. It'd be impossible to have, maybe even the smallest body of people, like let's say Orlando, Florida. So everybody that's a resident in Orlando, Florida constitutes we the people as the body politic in Orlando. And so there's, 200, 300,000 people. So in order for we the people of Orlando, Florida, in order for them to be a political entity, there would have to be a building that could house all those people and where you would be able to communicate with all those people and get their votes one by one. That would be we the people. Now, if you can times that, for a state, let's say Texas, how the heck do you imagine that you're going to fit every resident of Texas into a facility and then be able to get anything done legislatively wise? I mean, first of all, people aren't going to agree with each other to begin with. But second of all, it's going to be impossible to get millions of people into one building and to get some kind of consensus. So the whole plan has been all along is to have representatives. And that only works if the way to get these representatives are truthful, with the voting process and whatever have you not. So I mean, as most people know, I'm a firm guy on the fact that I don't think the voting system is working the way that we imagine that it should. And again, it's something that we have to take at face value. I mean, none of us are going to go out there and poll all of our neighbors to see who they voted for and then ride around the state and poll everybody in the state to see who they voted for and then compare those numbers to what the federal government is telling us are the numbers. So, I mean, basically, this is all a test of faith, I guess you could say, almost religiously.
A very true test of faith in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because we cast these votes, and the government is there to to count them, and supposedly they do it unbiasedly and whatever have you not. But I mean, we know human nature. We know that to be untrue. Everybody's got bias. So I mean, to me, the people in power are the people that the government wants in power. The directions that we take are the directions that the government wants us to take. I don't think any of this stuff happens by accident. Um, so I mean, to me, the 10th is a lot like a lot of the other ones. They're put out there to mimic freedom and to show people that, hey, you have freedoms here. Look, all these rights that aren't mentioned in the Constitution, they're reserved to the states and to the people. But again, not a lot of people realize that there are no people in that aspect. Um, so it's very misleading. Um, and again, the states, when we think of government, we have to remember how government is formed. Okay. And I like to use the deserted island because it really gives us a clear picture of what's there when nothing is. Okay, so if I'm on a deserted island and let's say you and Eyes on the State show up, you guys got a rowboat and you guys rowed over and you guys are now on my island. Okay, and all three of us are there now, and we say, hey, well, one needs to be the leader. So we're going to set up a government. Okay, and we're going to give you these powers as a government. Okay. Now there's just the three of us. Can I give? Let's say we elected you, Tyrant. Let's say we elected you to be the government. Okay. Could me or Eyes on the State give you the power to fly or to shoot lasers out of your eyes. There's, and I know it sounds extreme, but what I'm trying to get at is all the power that the government has comes from those they govern. Okay. We can't give them powers that we don't have. Okay. I can't give eyes on the state the right to go and to take your kids out of your home because I myself don't have that power. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, very clearly. That's a very
But
great way to articulate it as well.
right, and then somehow, because these guys have the magical name of government, they somehow get these magical powers that none of the citizens have. And it just leaves me wondering where did they get these powers from? A lot of people go off on that specific roadmap, and they look for indications and stuff in the law, and a lot of them become sovereign citizens because one of the greatest questions I think any man could have is what gives another man authority over you. If there's two men alone on an island, what gives one the power to tell the other one what to do? I mean, unless it's through force, which supposedly the United States is not based upon, it's based upon consent. So we somewhere have given consent to these people to exercise and have powers that we ourselves as individuals don't have. So,
Do you think, just if I can stop you real quick for a quick question, do you think the judicial branch of the government has something to do with that? Like, I would say that was a great analysis and interpretation and stuff, and a great explanation. But I don't think that the people have ever consented to this. I think it's kind of been handled beyond the will of the people, and perhaps hijacked to a degree by the
The
judicial branch
legislature.
that gives these powers, grants special powers without legislation, but through the judicial branch and its powers. I think maybe some of this stuff has come into fruition as opposed to the people actually consenting on one degree or another.
well, right, and you're right, and let me straighten that out a little bit. By consent, um, when we consent to be a part of society, we consent to all the laws that are passed by our elected representatives. So even if you don't vote, um, and let's say you live in Illinois, and whoever was voted in is the governor and the legislature, and they pass a law, even if you didn't vote for him, by your consent to be a part of that society, you've automatically consented to whatever laws they passed, be it unconstitutional or not. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, still realize that people in Chicago couldn't own guns for a good amount of years. And it didn't mean that they weren't American citizens, and it didn't mean that they didn't have a Second Amendment right. But in the Illinois society that they've consented to be a part of, guns were outlawed for a good number of years. And so even though that law was unconstitutional, they still had to live under that for 30 years. So basically, what happens is the legislature and the judicial branch, which mind you are both pretty much ran by bar members, lawyers, judges, obviously that nature, but also the laws that are written. Now I know nobody believes that anyone from either side of the aisle writes their own laws. Okay, Nancy Pelosi isn't up till 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning typing up that 400-page law that she put her name to, that she supposedly just started writing 2 days ago. They have teams of lawyers that write these laws, and these representatives, not even reading the law sometimes, go ahead and slap their name on it and push it through Congress. So it's when you really look at it, I'd say about 3/4 of the nation is ran by bar association members, bar lawyers, be it in the legislature, be it in the judicial branch, be it in the executive branch. Um, and they do, neat, crafty little stuff in these laws, like they exempt themselves. All the laws apply to everyone in the United States except for the legislator when they're in session, and certain things like that. And, to judges, it's really hard to beat judicial immunity for the judge. And even down to the little, law enforcement officers that they give qualified immunity to. These people all work in tandem, and the legislatures, the judicial branch, they realize that when it comes time to maybe grab guns, it's going to be the law enforcement officers that are going to do it. So you don't want to put law enforcement officers out there and hang them out to dry with no immunity, because then when the time comes, they're not going to be willing to back up your laws. They're not going to be willing to risk their lives to go out and grab guns. So um, that's basically where qualified immunity really comes from, is the fact that they know that they're going to need these soldiers when the time comes to finally put the boot down. They did a survey years ago in the Marine Corps, it's called the 29 Palm Survey, where they asked United States Marines if the government declared certain weapons illegal, would they open fire on a U.S. citizen? Would they go to take these guns and open fire if need be on a U.S. citizen? And they the Marines resoundingly, put down no. So, and that was back in the 80s. So, we got a lot of talk about blue helmets that would come in and fill the role of peacekeepers here in America if ever, stuff got out of hand. And it's not because obviously the United States military couldn't keep a hand on it. It's because of the fact that the United States military won't bend to the will of these legislatures and, basically assassinate their fellow man to enact some gun law for them. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here in the Constitution. They didn't teach us a lot about it. I mean, they gave us the once over, the America's great land of the free. Here's the document, and basically, that's it. Some people might have gone as far as reading, the Federalist Papers, which was just propaganda for the Constitution.
It was a communist newspaper, wasn't it?
Well, I'm not sure what the newspaper was as far as political leanings. I'm just saying that the Federalist Papers, in and of themselves, were nothing but propaganda put out by the very gentleman that put out the Constitution. Um, and where the Anti-Federalist Papers were, I guess you could say, propaganda against the Constitution. But, they don't encourage us to research that time period at all. As a matter of fact, I've met, people that consider themselves scholars that think that there's actually no documentation of what went on at the Constitutional Convention because it was, kept secret, and they locked everybody out. But there is documentation of what went on at the convention. It's called the Secret Proceedings and Debates of the Constitutional Convention. And it was written in the late 1700s by a gentleman who was um, a delegate, I believe, from Maryland to the Constitutional Convention. And reading that book has really opened my eyes to what those people back then were thinking. And a lot of them weren't thinking freedom. A lot of the founders were thinking King George, Washington, and they were thinking strong central government. And, they weren't thinking states. They were thinking about, doing the English status quo, but over here. So it was a very close debate. And, supposedly, luckily, they came out with the states and the republic. But just that whole time frame and what was going on, and what transpired, leads one to scratch their head. We had what was known back then as the Articles of Confederation. That is actually the founding charter of the United States of America. It's where the United States of America gets its name. And it's actually still law today. You can find it in the United States Code in the very front under front manner organic laws. We have 4 organic laws here in this country, and an organic law is like the founding charter. And those 4 organic documents are the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Ordinance, which was passed just a few months before the United States Constitution was. And if you look at it, the United States Constitution mimics a lot of the Northwest Ordinance, because at the time the Constitution was written, it wasn't written for the people of the states. The Bill of Rights, that wasn't put into the Constitution for the people of the states, because every state at that time already had a governing document. It already had a state constitution. There were already bills of rights in each state constitution. So somebody living in South Carolina didn't need a Bill of Rights with the federal Constitution, because back then in 1787, you didn't travel like you do today. People from South Carolina never made it up to New York, ever, you know? So what the Constitution was just what I'd like to say, almost a reprint of the Northwest Ordinance. The federal government now being owner of land, okay, in the DC area when that came about in the early 1800s, and the land that the states gave up, which made up the Northwest Territory, the Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, all those states. So the federal government owned and controlled that property. Now, if, let's say, you're a guy in South Carolina and you want to go out west, you want to go to the Northwest Territory, let's say Ohio, and you want to homestead, that's what the federal Constitution and the Bill of Rights was about. It was about you having rights as an American, even in an unincorporated territory, unlike the states. Because the unincorporated territories, they had no government. The United States Congress has always been the government of any land that the United States owns. So they didn't have any government. They didn't have any rights per se to speak of, except, natural rights. But being that they were an American citizen, they traded those for civil rights of their state. But they needed something when they were in these territories, hence the Bill of Rights. Now, if you read a lot of case law from back then, it said over and over and over again that the Bill of Rights doesn't protect citizens against state action. That's all the way up until the 14th Amendment. And then if you notice with the 14th Amendment, now all the civil rights, all the Bill of Rights apply to every citizen in any state or territory. But that wasn't like that before the 14th Amendment. So let's say you're in Georgia, and Georgia has a no right to, let's say, bear arms. Okay, let's say in Georgia there was no right to bear arms. A citizen of Georgia before the 14th Amendment could not sue the state of Georgia for a violation of their Second Amendment right, because they had no Second Amendment right against state action. They only had that Second Amendment right when they went to DC or when they were out in the Northwest Territory. So it wasn't until the 14th was adopted that these Bill of Rights were adopted to us to be able to sue states when they violated those rights. So I mean, the Constitution is a very, I want to say, hidden document, because there's a lot of stuff on the face that you read that we think we understand, but when we dig deeper, it's totally not what we thought it would be. Um, Another great example I like to use is the private property clause. Logically, if I have a piece of land here, and let's say I paid $200,000 for it, it's my home, it's my land, it's private property, supposedly. So in the Constitution, it says no private property shall be taken without just compensation. The Supreme Court has decided that just compensation is fair market value for the house. Okay, so let's say I got a piece of property, I paid 200 grand for it. Let's say that fair market value, there was a dip in real estate, so it's worth 175,000. Let's say that's fair market value, just compensation. No one can tell me how a city can take someone's home for $5,000 or $10,000 and back taxes, and that be constitutional. Okay, because if you're taking someone's home for $10,000 in back taxes, and the home's worth 200,000, 175,000, that in no way can be considered just compensation. But they do it all the time. So how did they get away with it? There's only two ways. One is that our property is not private property. Okay? And they can take it for whatever compensation they like. Or two, our home is private property, and the courts and everybody is just ignoring the constitutional provision that you can't take private property without just compensation. Now, I know a lot of people think that the government goes against the Constitution, but in reality, what happens is that they go exactly by the Constitution. We are just misinformed about what the Constitution is, how it applies to us, and how we interact with it. Because I can tell you, they don't go against the Constitution with the private property clause, because all of our property is public. Okay. The only time private property applies is between two citizens. Okay. So let's say you put up private property signs on your property, and then I come by and walk on it. You could press charges on me for trespassing, private property, get off, yada, yada. But the government itself has many exceptions to come onto your quote unquote private property. They can do it while chasing a felon through your yard. Um, the Wildlife Commission, down here, Florida Fish and Game or whatever. I mean, they can come onto people's property anytime they want and just say, well, we thought you were poaching. So now we're going to look through your coolers, and we're going to look through your freezers to make sure that you're not hiding some rare one-eared deer that you shot or something. Who knows, whatever. But the government doesn't have those same restrictions on private property. And more those restrictions, or the rights that we have, I guess you could say, on that private property are dwindling and dwindling. Now you got cops walking, up to your door, up to your window, looking in your window, going around the back of your house. They see a fence. It is Major Awesome. Thank you, sir. But you see all this, and it doesn't jive with what we've been taught. And our first reaction is, oh my God, these guys, they're out of control. They're going against what the Constitution stands for, but yet no court is backing that up. And so we're sitting over here scratching our heads saying, well, man, that's got to be unconstitutional. But the court's not saying it's not unconstitutional. So what's really going on here? And I think when people clear away everything that we've been taught by the government about the government and about the Constitution, and we take some time and we go back and we trace back how all this came about, we'll see exactly what people like Patrick Henry saw back then and what Lindsay Spooner saw in the 1800s. That the Constitution is actually a document that I would want to say even enslaves us. It makes us open to what is being done. As Lindsay Spooner said, if either the Constitution has either not been able to stop what is happening or it has allowed it to happen, but either way, it's trash. You can't look at what is out here today and say, oh well, the Constitution allowed that to happen, and that's great. These police killing people and our rights being violated. So it either has allowed that to happen or it has been unable to stop that from happening. But either scenario is just trash. Either way you look at why cops are allowed to shoot people for reaching for their wallets and not getting in trouble, any way you look at that is trash. All right, there is no good way to look at that. You can't say, well, blah 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 and blah blah blah. It's trash. It's all trash. The fact that we pay 60% of our income to taxes and fines and fees, that's all trash.
Oh my God, you're not kidding. Connecticut is an absolutely out of control, high taxed, overtaxed nanny state.
Right. And so at what point do we as Americans, because listen, we were never taxed this heavily by Britain. We were upset over a 3% tax, not a 60% tax. So at what point do we as Americans look to each other and say, hey, this is no longer freedom, this is slavery,
It's
you know?
extortion. It's under the threat of duress. Essentially, we're threatened with penalties, taxes, tax evasion laws. If you don't pay your property tax, essentially the federal government will show up and kick you off of your property, whether or not you own the deed on that property. I mean, you could own that property. You've paid the mortgage. You own the deed. The bank's got no ties with you anymore. And if you fail to pay your taxes, essentially your landlord, if you will, is going to show up and evict you, and you'll be thrown in prison. Which makes the situation even more complicated. And there's always an incentive for the state government and the federal government in that regard to facilitate that action against the people. And it's disgusting. And it's just one example to kind of throw in to what you're saying in relativity to the overall problem.
Right. I've got a perfect example. It was in the Michigan Supreme Court. I believe it was last year, maybe this year. I'm not sure what the outcome of it was, but this gentleman owed, and I kid you not, it was something like $8 in back taxes. And the county ended up taking his property and they sold the property. Now, a lot of times people think what happens in these back tax sales is that the government auctions off the property and then takes whatever money that you owed them in taxes and gives the rest to you. And that's not really the case once you look at it. Some states, they don't give you the money back. Some of them give you partial money back. A lot of times it takes years and years for you to get that money. But in this case, the county sold the gentleman's property and they kept all the money. Okay. And the gentleman sued him. And last I heard, it was going through the Michigan Supreme Court about how the county thought it was okay for them to keep all the money from the proceeds of the sale from this gentleman's house because he owed $8. So I mean, there's numerous examples. You can Google how home taken for $500 in back taxes, and you'll see a whole bunch of stories and articles about people's homes that were taken for, I mean, little to no money. And what happens is it could be $500 in taxes. It happened to another gentleman, $500 in taxes. and they kicked him out. And, he tried to scramble to get the money up. Well, when he goes back to pay the money, well, there's fines and fees and late fees added on. And now the $500 is up to $5,000. And he can't afford to pay it, and he loses his home. This is an actual story. House was worth $190,000. He ended up losing it for $5,000. So, I mean, and again, 60% of our income is gone. I mean, when you add it up, 60% for federal income tax, local taxes, state taxes, gas tax, liquor tax, whatever tax you want to put in there. When you add up every dollar that you pay out to the government, fines, fees, registrations, licenses, you're
Sales
paying
tax.
you're paying about 60% of your yearly income to the
And they want
government.
more now. They want more. They're
Oh, well,
coming for
that's
more.
that. I haven't even started yet, brother, because listen, they keep charging up the debt. Okay, so right now, our interest payment on the debt is about 500 billion to $1 trillion a year. That's our interest payment on the
It's
debt.
almost inconceivable. It's almost unpayable. It's almost to
Well,
the point where it's
it will
irreversible.
be. Well, right, but we have to realize what the interest rates are right now. They're what, at like 0%, 1%?
Yeah, there's some very strange things going on with the Fed.
Okay. So if we're paying 500 billion to $1 trillion a year in interest on our debt, what's going to happen when those interest rates go up to just a modest 7 or 8%? Because for those of you that don't remember, back in the late 70s, interest rates were all the way up to, I believe, 17 or 19% was the interest rate, I believe, back in the late 70s. So even at half that, at 7 or 8%, which is not unforeseeable, you're talking about an interest payment that is going to be more than what the government takes in taxes per year. Because right now they're saying about 2.5 to $3.5 trillion a year they're taking in taxes. But the interest payment on a 7%, when it's already at half a trillion now, you're looking at $4 or $5 trillion interest payment at 7, 8, 9%. So that's why they've been keeping the interest rates down for so long. It hasn't been for anything other than the fact that once those interest rates rise, we're going to be crushed, and due to exponential growth and the amount of borrowing we do, we're never going to be able to pay off that debt. I mean, it's physically impossible. We're at that point now to where we could not borrow any more money at all for the rest of eternity, and we're still not going to be able to pay off the debt. That's seriously mind-boggling. And the fact that our kids, okay, if we're paying 60% now and they're borrowing more and more money, logically, that means my kid is going to be paying 70 or 80% of their money to the federal government, to the state governments for fines and fees and what have you not. So at what point do we say enough is enough? At what point do we say this isn't freedom? This is me working my life away and giving you more than half of what I make during my life. For what?
I think this has a very strong connection that can be associated with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the monetary policy of the United States, how the interest rates are set, how much paper currency is going to be in the market, all that sort of stuff. Would you agree with that? Like, can you kind of tie this in and how our monetary policy and all this stuff kind of
Well,
relates to everything we're talking about
well,
in
absolutely. The
relation to the
monetary
10th Amendment
policy
and
was
the relationship
specifically
between the
set
federal
up.
government, the states, and the people?
Yeah, the monetary policy was specifically set up to fail.
You
I
got
mean,
it.
yeah, I mean that's exactly what it was set up to do. I mean, if somebody tells me that if I put my finger in a pencil sharpener and I twirl the pencil sharpener that it's going to get cut, and I do that 10 times and it happens every 10 times, all 10 of my fingers are bloody, I mean, who's the guy that's going to stick his special finger in that pencil sharpener and turn it? You know what I mean? And that's the same thing with our currency system. The fiat currency had been used for hundreds of years, okay? And it's always collapsed. It's not an if, it's not a maybe. It's always collapsed every single time it's been used. And the reason why is because you can't allow men to print money based on nothing and expect that they won't print a little bit extra and stick it in their shoe. Okay? Back when during the Revolutionary War, we had another fiat currency called the Continental Dollar. And George Washington famously stated that you could not buy a wagon load of provisions with a wagon load of money, because Congress had printed so many continental dollars that it basically made them worthless, just like in Germany for the the Weimar hyperinflation. And that's what you see what happens with fiat currencies. They just print and print and print and print until that money is worthless. And if you look at how much our dollar is worth today compared to 1913, or hell, even 1970, we've lost 40, 50, 60% of our buying power since 1970s. In our lives,
The gold
we've lost
standard.
over 50% of our buying power.
Right. We've gone from a AAA credit rating to a AA credit rating in recent times. I think it was Nixon who got rid of the gold standard. I don't want to get too far off topic, but the Federal Reserve is a very big problem, and the last president to ever try to address that problem was assassinated. And I think it was at that time that this country really was hijacked at its highest level of office, and it's been under the control of the bankers and the folks that are globally invested in international endeavors that supersede the interests of what they consider to be, out of date nation states. I think one of the very first things we need to do to try and address these very serious problems, which you have so well articulated this evening, is like John Felix. I wish he was here. You got to start on a local level. We can work our way up, and it's very important that we take control over our monetary policy by beginning the audit of the private Federal Reserve and putting these people in check and really putting the debt that is just rampantly out of control to an excessive and terrifying level that really terrifies me for the future of my children. I've got a number of children, and they range from ages 3 to 12, and I know that no matter what kind of progress you and I can make together in our cooperative efforts here on Tyrant Slayer Studios, or even that of Activism News Network, aren't going to be things that come into fruition with enough momentum and power to sway things expeditiously enough to change them in our lifetime. But I think it's incumbent upon us, as long as that we're alive and with every breath that we have, that we do everything we can to kind of secure the best chances for our kids and give them a path to ride upon, a trajectory to orbit upon that can take them to the next level, really unite the country and the people, really become the United States and what our founding fathers intended it to be, rather than what these folks are interpreting all of our documents to be for the sake of their benefit and other political agendas and financial gains. It's everything we are here for is for the future of this country. The engine of America and the survival of it depends on the will of the people to fight for it. And we used to go to war in this country over a breakfast drink. They were going to tax, our tea. Let's take it back to the Sons of Liberty and the Boston Tea Party real quick. And then I'll give you the helm again, because you're doing such a fantastic job. You got my heart pounding. This is all very valuable information, folks. If you're just tuning in, you've been listening to Majorly Awesome, aka Rogue Nation. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to Activism News Network. You could do that at www.activismnewsnetwork.com. You can begin streaming Activism News Network, ANN, on your favorite Android device, on your Roku box at home. And if you haven't heard by now, or you have failed to read the video description, we are going to give away a 4K HDR Roku Premiere box this evening, which would be a great way to take advantage of the Activism News Network channel upon Roku, where you can subscribe, or you can go right to the website. Again, that's www.activismnewsnetwork.com. He's been doing a fantastic job this evening. Holy cow, I lost my train of thought. I'm kind of pumped up. Maybe I should just give it back to you now.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit in the chat. Some people had some questions about one said the best way to ensure against the hyperinflation coming. And, a lot of people will go with gold and silver, but, you know, that's right, YouTube. But to me, I feel that, who is not concerned with the fiat currency and with the dollar collapsing possibly is the Amish. Okay. And the reason they're not concerned about the dollar collapsing and they're not out buying gold and silver is because a man can produce everything he needs to live, and he can do it on his own land. And I saw a video years ago, a gentleman out in California, he had 1/10 of an acre that he lived on. His house was on that he lived on. And he was able to produce 3/4 of the food that his family of four ate year round on that 10th of an acre. So before we worry about hyperinflation coming, because we got to realize that money as its bare necessity is there to buy us what we need. So if we can produce ourselves what we need, if we can, catch our own rainwater, or if we have our own well and we don't have to rely on the city, and if we can grow our own food and that kind of stuff, then we're not reliant on whether the dollar collapses or not. We're not relying on other men.
Well, it's no wonder why it's actually a crime in some states to collect rainwater or to distribute fresh milk that's not pasteurized through a facility FDA approved of some kind, to your neighbors and things like that. People have faced some serious charges, just kind of trying to be self-sustaining and independent at this point in modern times. It's terrifying.
Right, yeah. If you live in the city limits and you try to disconnect from the power or the water company, forget about it. They'll fine you all the way till you're out of your house.
There's a U.S. veteran, and it was a tremendously touching story. I come across it 5 years ago, long before I had gotten to this point as an activist, and it was one of the more inspiring things I come across on the internet. A gentleman who served in Afghanistan and out in the Middle East throughout my lifetime had returned home and essentially transformed two trailers, two big, tractor trailer trailers into his house, and was trying to collect rainwater, and he was not connected to the electrical grid. He was not taking in outside public utilities and things like that, and he insisted on living off of the grid, self-sustaining with his wife and his family. And he was being arrested over and over and over again and trespassed on his own property. And this is a man who's got a Purple Heart and served our country. And he's in his rather heartbreaking story expressing how deeply this was affecting him, considering everything that he did, thinking that he can come home and just be
left alone.
And it's something I could look up. I'll make a community post about it, but it is absolutely relevant to the topic of discussion this evening.
Right. No, and I've heard stories like that as well, where people were living I want to say too plainly, but
Off grid, they call it
right,
off grid.
off grid, and they were being hassled by it, and hassled about it. So yeah, I mean, they definitely want to keep everybody in control. They want to be in control, and I think again that
Zimbabwe endured a very similar situation economically. The central banking history is well documented. I just think it's underreported. Enormously underreported. Zimbabwe experienced hyperinflation. It once had an economy damn near the equivalent of the United States. I would assume you're aware of that. Could you touch on the history of Zimbabwe and how hyperinflation and the engineered collapse of an economy began shortly after the erection of a private central bank in that economy, like here in the U.S.?
Well, right, and there's been others. Venezuela, I believe, went through an economic collapse in early 2000. Um, and these are just money guys, and they're just playing with the currencies out there, and making money off the rise and fall of them. It's obvious that the people closest to the printer get the most benefit of the money being printed, and as that money makes its way through the system, it gets watered down, but the buying power per se gets watered down. Um, so I mean, it's for thousands of years, humans have looked to, I guess you could say, rule it all. Conquer the world. Everyone had that dream back in the day. Alexander the Great and all these other men, they wanted to make men heel under them. And for thousands of years, they tried to do it with force, with armies and conquering and that kind of stuff. And it never worked well for them. It always fell apart. I mean, even the Roman Empire eventually fell apart. And what happened is they got hip to the fact that, people like cows are going to be more productive when they're free range. Okay. They're not going to be as productive when they think that nothing is going to accumulate to them for their hard work. So I equate where we are today with free range cows. We produce more when we think that the benefits of us out there working. Hoarding food will become a crime. Um, these benefits will accrue to us from all this hard work we do. And if you talk to most Americans, that's, basically what most people want. They want to work hard, they want to get ahead. And at the end of their life, they want to pass that on to their children. Whatever they've acquired, they want to pass that on to their children. Um, and so that's why, people work so hard. But, you know, there's only two states that a man can live in, a man or a woman can live in. One is slavery, the other is freedom. There's no degrees of either. You're either free or you're a slave.
It literally is black and white.
It literally is. It's pretty much black and white.
There's no middle ground, and it
No.
seems to be adamant among, especially the younger generation in today's society, that they think like, well, true socialism, like a government, like they're fighting for a system that is essentially been plaguing us, is being embraced by the younger generation. And they seem to think that the middle ground hasn't actually been tried yet, or something. Like in the U.S., we can make this work. It failed over there, but that was different. That was different. This guy was there's always an excuse. And what I see is history repeating itself. A lot of people, I would assume, can relate to me when I was coming up in school, especially high school, and I was learning about the Holocaust and things of that nature, Nazi Germany. One of my questions in it, and it just always begged over every subject about it, like, how could people let this happen? How could people let this happen? to this day. That question bewilders me because I've never gotten in it. How could people let this happen? And I'm seeing it happen now here, where like my mother's father and my great uncles and everybody has fought in the Korean War, in the Vietnam War, in World War II, and World War One. My family come from literally Italy and Ireland, and there was a connection on Ellis Island, and one thing leads to another, and like everything's old school. Like if you looked at Godfather, there used to be for immigration. I'm getting really off topic, but real quick, immigration, people were screened. You were given a citizenship test. You had to know about America and value it to a degree to kind of be looked at as someone who was coming here faithfully. And as you said earlier, there's a very big faith-based relationship between the people here and the government, and we've been let down in a very, very big way. And we're going to go ahead and give John Filax a link, and I'll give the floor back to you. I got some things to do here behind the scenes, but very good discussion this evening. We're here with Rogue Nation, aka Majorly Awesome, and he's been providing a very tremendous, very great level of history and insight here on the 10th Amendment, and providing a number of relative ways that it impacts our relationship with our state and federal government, and the federal government and the state. I think it's important that the audience here engage and participate. If you guys got questions, I'll go ahead and throw that stuff up on screen. Major Lee will go ahead and incorporate that best he can, try to get to what he can, and make and keep things relative. And hopefully we all walk away at the end of the night with a bit of insight, and we engage our neighbors and family and friends with it, and help spread the message, because this is what we call real news and objective media, and we're here to educate, inspire, and create a positive force for progress in the United States, which is needed now more than ever in my lifetime. The older folks, the baby boomer generation, may have lived through things like this in the 60s and things of that nature, and I think their ability to endure all that and come out of it and still be productive members of society is a tremendous accomplishment, and we have things to learn from the older generation. We should listen. So without further ado, Rogue Nation, Majorly Awesome, please take the floor, and I'll go ahead and get John Filax in here, and we'll go from there.
All right, great. Yeah, you know what I was saying on the freedom versus slave thing is that there's only two states that men can live in, men and women can live in. And when you owe obligations to another man or woman, you can't consider yourself to be free, especially when those obligations are to men and women that you don't even know. So in reality, in life, on this blue marble that we're on, people can only be free outside of a society. So when we're in a society, we are contractually obligated to do certain things, pay taxes, obey the laws. Here in America, one of our duties of citizenship is voting and signing up for selective service. And what I want to illustrate, and what's so important about this, is because, as it is today, right now, as we speak, the state can come to any of our homes, mine or yours, anybody in the chat rooms. The state can come to any of our homes, take whatever it wants, up to and including our life, and really ends up facing no consequences for these actions. So how do I, as a man, knowing that no matter how long I work, how hard I work, no matter what I accumulate, that at any point in time, at literally any point in time, the state can show up at my door take everything from me, up to and including my life, my family's life, and face absolutely no repercussions for that, how can I look in a mirror with a straight face and say that I'm free?
I, as a parent, have a very relative problem with pediatricians in that regard. They're not held liable for any sort of adverse reaction a vaccine, a booster shot, an inoculation may have on a child life. There's been documentation of children going into anaphylactic. How do you say that word? Jesus.
Anaphylactic?
Yeah, shock and having seizures right there on the table. And the parent, unbeknownst to them, in the fine print at the very bottom of that consent to treat or whatever it is form that they sign there at the pediatrician's office, they waive their rights to hold the pediatrician liable. There's no accountability and no liability for any damages done to children regarding vaccines. And despite that, there are billions of dollars that have been paid out to victims who have suffered injury and even death. There are kids that die from these shots. And I think it's terrifying to think that there's a vaccine being rushed and pushed through here in regards to this virus, despite all the controversy about it, despite all this conflicting data about it and misinformation, disinformation being, drowning out the good information and the stifling of dissent and just, everything that's going on. I think it's very, very scary that, they're talking about mandated vaccines and this, that, and the other thing. And there's already bureaucracies like DCF set up. You're going to have teachers unions and on this stuff. There's going to be mandated reporters that are contracted with the state, but are also like privately contracted. It's like a huge violation of our rights. Yeah, everybody's going to, oh, this family's not vaccinating, that one's not vaccinating. They're going to put like scanners at the door. If you don't have a vaccine, they're going to have like an app on your phone. And they're going to have some like administrator side to this, and you're going to be the client side, if you will, almost like a computer transaction. And when you walk into a store, if this thing scans you and it comes up and says you haven't been vaccinated, they're not going to let you shop there. You're not going to be able to go into the DMV. Your life is going to be turned into hell because there's going to be a centralized dictatorial government that's based upon the willing participants, which would be the equivalent to the people in Nazi Germany saying, yeah, I got 3 Jews living next door to me right now. I think they're hiding in a fake wall behind the bookcase. Please don't kill us. We're just hungry over here. Can you bring a loaf of bread when you come to subdue them? It's like we got neighbors talking on neighbors. You can't talk politics at Thanksgiving. You can't talk politics at the bar. You can't talk politics at work. You can't post stuff on Facebook without risking losing your job. Where are we supposed to talk to each other and come together to figure out the solutions to these problems, man? We can go all night about talking about how all this stuff is adversely affecting us. I think it would be creative to talk a little bit about, when the time is right, the solutions and what you believe and John believes, what I believe, and what the listeners here believe we can do to try to change things together as a real force for progress and as real united citizens in the United States.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, with that, folks, I give you John Filax.
I told you guys, it's going to take an irate minority, and it's going to have to be on a local level. None of us are going to be able to accumulate enough people to do something on a national level. We don't have the money to make a third party, and if we did, the amount of money it would take to get that third party in front of an audience to make a change nationally would be next to impossible. But what's not impossible is to get hundreds of people to show up to local city commission meetings over one specific topic week after week after week until it happens. Kind of like Justin Pulliam and them are doing in Leon Valley. Just keep going, just keep on and keep on. And finally, after several years, they got some progress. But that's, you got to make that first hole in the wall before you can escape the tyranny.
Yeah, and that that'll work on a local level. but it's not going to change the holes in the dam that are the federal government and the state government. And even then, we got to worry about, once these people get in the office locally, a lot of times people will tell us what we want to hear, as we know. And once they get in the office,
They're lobbied
either by, their own admission,
or blackmail.
or blackmail, or, we have to look at it, I think, in this type of situation.
Inside trading interests.
Well, right, right. If the mafia kills people over $100,000 operations, is the government going to allow the people to mess with their multi-billion and trillion-dollar operations? And
How would they stop it?
huh?
How could they stop it?
Well, have you heard about all the homeopathic doctors that have died over the last 3 years?
Right.
Mysterious muggings.
No, you don't hear about it.
Well, if you look it up, you do. But
Yeah.
basically, what I'm trying to get at is that there's two ways that you can go about it. You can ostracize the person in the media, because, as you said, there's no way that we can get on a national or even a state level to compete with whatever propaganda they're putting out. So they can ostracize us, make us into domestic terrorists.
The language is changing all the time. In fact, like nationalism is a nationalist is now connected to a white
Racism.
supremacist or a racist sort of derogatory meaning, when it's really a man who is willing to sacrifice, securing his family and staying home and going out to willingly fight for his country and what he believes is a noble cause for freedom and defending his country and the security of his family, abroad or in whatever operation the military
And not to
says
get
they need.
entangled in foreign stuff. No, our country is the important country. That's what a nationalist is. Our country is first. The other countries, if we can help them, we can. If we can't, our country's first.
Yeah,
That's
for
what I
years
see
I was
it.
known as America First on Twitter and things. It's something that I've believed in for a long time, and I don't remember associating myself with something that was deemed so derogatory by my fellow citizens and members of the media around me. It's totally changed now. The language has changed now. It's different than it was
Right.
even in the 90s.
That's right.
So, I mean, that poses another great problem unto itself. I mean, we're talking logical, factual, historical fact here. We're talking real world, real life experience, referring to real situations. And it's almost like they can be dismissed on the grounds that, a certain language, a narrative alone, and the control thereof, that narrative alone, will dictate who wins that argument, because the language is always under their control. So it doesn't matter what the people say in this kind of atmosphere, as far as I can tell. And that's another problem that I think we should address as auditors and as people actively engaged in the community. I think we need to try to keep up on the language and learn an intelligent way to use it against the very mechanisms that are beating us down with it.
What do you think the number one thing we would want done with the police would be?
Well, I'll tell you what the number one thing I want, and it's a very ambitious thing. I'm not foolish in my perspective. It's a very ambitious goal, but I think all the state police troops, specifically here in Connecticut, I think there's got to be a minimum right now of 1,200 or 1,600. It's one of the two. There's got to be that many state troopers around the state, and that's all union-based contract bullshit stuff. And none of these guys are ever properly trained, and that's why we have such a problem with these guys out here. I think they should all be dissolved. I think we should be able to seize their databases and their intelligence and stuff, as well as local police. And I think all law enforcement should be elected, We should get back to the time of sheriff and deputy, and every person that's going to be in our community should be a known person, a respected person, someone that we can all trust and rely upon, because we can't trust upon what we have now, and we can't rely upon strangers, and we see what happens when we encounter them. We've seen what happened to James Freeman and how the state took him away from his family and what they did to him, and how
You're
he had
saying to dissolve the state and local police?
and create sheriffs. Every county, every town will
Right.
elect their law enforcement and
I think we
determine
should
the
elect.
sum of law enforcement that it should have.
We shouldn't. I think we should elect not only the sheriff but the deputies too. With the internet,
Every
you can use the
position of
internet.
law enforcement should be an elected, publicly uh, uh, manifested position. The people
That is a
who
tall
these
order.
people are serving. So we have an active role in that, just like we have in the national election, just like we have in our local elections. All of these officials need to be representative and indicative of our will and us and what we
And
desire.
and logistically, how do you get that done?
We have to take control over we have to somehow find a way to get rid of these unions. We have to expose the corrupt contracts between the unions and the state, and we have to use the stuff that we can against them as
Expose them
quickly.
to who?
I know what you're saying. What judge isn't bought and paid for? What system do we bring it to if it's all corrupt? Well,
And which American has the brain span to listen to even what you're saying right now
not one American, not one, but
and register it?
together, it's different. Together, it's different, and this is why we're
Right, but
called the United States.
that's why they keep us separated. That's why
Correct.
that's why the government has put out, and this is the facts. The government has put out two competing sets of beliefs. They put out the left wing set of beliefs, they put out the right wing set of beliefs. They push these through their TV programming, they push these through their radio advertising, they push these through the public schooling.
Duopoly,
Right. So
the
now,
illusion of choice.
when people get out of high school, you can be assured that 80 to 90% of them
Have been
are going to
programmed.
vote one way or another. A lot of
College even
times,
furthers it. They get even more radical through college.
right. So, and again, what's happening is it's a breakdown of the education. There's not a lot of people questioning because not a lot of people understand how to question or even what they're supposed to question. A lot of people just take word of whoever the authority is in their life. As toddlers, we take our parents' word for it. As we progress in age, we then substitute our parents' word for our teacher's word, or somebody we idolize. Once we're in high school and college, and let's say we want to be a lawyer. Well, there's lawyers that the up and coming lawyer idolizes, and he goes to them for advice, and they get advice. And it to me, it boils down to, again, the simple fact that not one single person I've ever met, man or woman, has ever in their life gone to a job and been told that they need a social security number to work at that job, and has then turned around and asked their employer to show them that law that requires them to have the social security number. Not one person I've ever met has ever asked their employer to show them the law that states they need that social security number to work. Now, why is that? Because we've been programmed not to ask questions. We've been programmed to accept whatever is the mainstream concept, whatever everybody can agree with, the majority. And then we've also been programmed that when someone is outside of the mainstream thinking, that they are weird or crazy or a conspiracy theorist, or out of their meds, or whatever have you not. We've been programmed to self-police our own society. So, for example, if you're at a bar and you're talking about how you're not going to pay the United States government any more taxes, And, I don't know if any of you have ever been in that position, but I like to put myself in these kind of positions to see the reactions that I'll get. And the reaction that you'll get if you ever try it is that people will first of all call you crazy and tell you that you can't do that. But second of all, they're upset with you. And the reason they're upset with you is because you're trying to do something that they want to do, but because someone in authority told them they have to pay taxes, they've never even bothered to look at any of the IRS laws. I mean, literally none of the IRS laws. How many people that pay taxes today could even tell you that the IRS tax code is Title 26 of the United States Code? Very few people, my friend, unless they're specifically a tax accountant or they do their own taxes or something of that nature. They wouldn't have a clue. Ask anybody that goes to H&R Block for their taxes what the title is for the IRS code.
I've done that.
Yeah, and nobody knows. All we
Because
know,
it doesn't exist.
well, right. The actual law, and again, this is where they fool us. There is no actual law in the Title 26 IRS code that makes us liable to pay taxes on our income. However,
if you live and work in the United States, that's right.
Right. However, in the first Social Security Tax Act that was passed, section, I believe, 801, it's called Other Taxes on Income. In that law, right, in that law, it makes it so that we're liable for income tax. So
Hold on. You're talking about section 861 of 26, Title 26?
no, the Social Security code, I believe, is something in the 40s, maybe 49, but don't quote me on that. But it's different than the Title 26 IRS tax code, because the Social Security Tax Act is a completely different act than the IRS.
But that's not what the IRS is relying on to make you pay income tax.
Well, no, they're relying on the fact, first of all, they're relying on the fact that you never ever get clued in on the fact of what income actually is.
Correct.
They're also relying upon the fact that you, again, don't look for that obligation.
Correct.
But really, there's no need for them to have that obligation in there, because of the simple fact that as a member of the society, we're obligated. Even before the Constitution was written, we were obligated to support society. I mean, that's just it's actual common sense. I mean, if me and you, John, and Tyrant Slayer, we wanted to start a society, we'd have to support that society somehow, right? I mean, it's not gonna generate money on its own. It's a non-living entity. It's a figment of our imagination.
Yeah, we have to add value to it, either through our labor or some way.
Absolutely. And so, and this is for any society. It doesn't matter. See, because society is always there before government is there.
That's right.
So anywhere you look in life, society has always been there before government. So, and this makes a lot of people mad, but I tell them that the Constitution and the Republic that they have has come after society here in the United States. And that society already had obligations before the Constitution was written. And if you read the Constitution, it says that nothing in the Constitution will void any contracts before the Constitution. Okay? And the contract they're talking about is the social contract, in which you entered society and you agreed to obey all the laws that the society passed, that you agreed to give a portion of the money you make in order to support said society.
When did I agree to that?
Well, we agree to that under a legal doctrine called domicile. And domicile has been passed down to us over 1,000 years by the Romans, and every country in the world today uses domicile. And basically, there's three forms of domicile. You have domicile of birth, you have domicile of choice, and you have domicile of law. And the domicile of birth states that the child, no matter where he's born, is a citizen of wherever his parents owe allegiance to. Okay? So if you and your wife are American military and you're, in the Philippines and you have a child there, even though it's in the Philippines, it automatically becomes a United States citizen. That's also the reason why a citizen here from the United States, let's say you were born here in America and you lived here till you were 18 and you were like, you know what, I'm going to move to Russia. And you move your happy ass to Russia. And you, for the rest of your life, never live in America. You still pay American taxes every year that you are considered as an American citizen in Russia. Okay? The only way that you can get out of paying United States taxes, even if you live overseas the rest of your life, is to renounce your allegiance to the United States and pledge your allegiance to whatever sovereign whose land you're living on now. Because a man can only have one sovereign. You can live in every country in the world, but you can only pledge your allegiance to one sovereign. And that's how that works. So as a child already, we are entered into the social contract of whatever society our parents owe allegiance to. And the reason again for that was because the Roman citizens, they fought hard for their rights and they wanted to make sure that those rights were passed on to their children. Roman citizenship back in the day was a very highly priced thing. And so today, now in America, our consent is granted at what's known as the age of majority. And the age of majority is the age that we're legally allowed to enter into contracts and we're considered pretty much an adult. Most of it's 18 here in the States. I have seen 19 years old in one or two states, but basically it's 18 years old. Now, at the age of majority or after, we have a choice. We could stay here in America, and the act of us staying here in America is our consent to being part of the society. Or we could take and we could move overseas and move wherever we would like to that will have us and pledge our allegiance to them. And then we would be a member of their society and no longer a member of the United States society. And that is domicile by choice. So I'm sure you've heard the thing, if you don't make a choice, you still have made a choice. That's pretty much how we get roped into it, because they don't explain any of this to us. They don't explain that we have an option. Hey, if you don't like it here, you can go somewhere else. But also, technically, we wouldn't have to go anywhere else. You could be a person, a guy here in America, and not be a citizen. The proper term for it is statelessness or stateless. And those are folks that don't owe any obligations to any political entities. And basically, most of them that are in the world today are that way through refugee status. They were in a country that collapsed and is no longer there, so they have nowhere to go, and they're refugees. There's about 3 to 4 million stateless people in the world today. There's about 3 to 5,000 stateless people that live here in the United States. But again, they got that status through not knowing the law, not because they knew the law. If someone actually knew the law and was stateless, you would actually have just as many rights as any American citizen has. You'd be able to travel, you'd be able to, to do all this and do all that, but still there's the sticking point of being on someone else's land, somebody's land that they have claimed. Okay, so I mean, even if you let's say you're American citizen and you go to Russia and you say, I don't want to be an American citizen anymore, and I don't want to be a Russian citizen either. I just want to be left alone. You would still have to obey the laws that
Duh.
Russia passes for the land that you're upon.
Duh.
So the days of people actually being free by the actual technical term and actually being free is no longer available to any of us because the governments have all claimed every speck of land on the planet. So wherever you go on the planet, you either are visiting or you have to be a member of that society. There's no
Government
other
is
two ways
scamming.
around it. Right. So and that's domicile by choice. Now domicile by law is a domicile that's picked by a guardian, be it the state or be it a legal guardian, because the person is mentally incapable of making that decision themselves. And as I'm sure you could guess, those people tend to stay in whatever society they were born in. And again, the whole reason behind this domicile thing is because, back in the day, the kings realized if all my citizens are moving, out of the country or whatever and not staying here, I'm losing my tax base. I'm losing these royalties or whatever. So, um, you know, now with domicile, you're a citizen until you actively revoke that. And in some countries, you can't revoke that. In North Korea, you're stuck there for life, bro. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Here in America, we can make that choice to move somewhere else if we so decide. If we decide that society has better civil rights or more civil rights that are more in tune with what we want than what we're getting here. And that's why you'll hear a lot of people from a lot of other countries, the Netherlands and other places, and they'll tell you, we're more free here than you are there. And basically, none of us are free. We're all living on a plantation. This is a United States plantation. And we have the best plantation because our masters, they allow us to have beer and 56 channels of porn and, whatever else is used to distract us from the fact that they're taking 60% of our income.
Hold on. Where do you get 56 channels of porn?
That was just a that was just a guesstimation, but
Okay. I was asking for a friend. Go carry on.
asking for a friend. Okay. um. So yeah. So I mean, it's a twisted world that we live in. I don't foresee us being able to stop the currency from collapsing, especially by electing local officials. I mean, again, that'll do something locally, but what we're facing is much larger problems. I mean, to me, I'm surprised that the currency has held up as long as it has. I thought by now.
It's just about gone, but yeah, so did I. I thought it would be gone by now.
Yeah, so I mean, they're finding ways to keep it pushing along, and as long as people believe that the dollar's worth something, then it's going to be worth something. But as soon as people realize that the dollar's actually not worth the paper it's printed on, I mean, we're really screwed, And it could come about. There's so many cliffs that we're hanging on right now. The dollar reserve status. If that goes, we're screwed. If the dollar collapses, we're screwed. If interest rates rise to 7 to 10%, we're screwed. I mean, there's so many ways that society is barely hanging on right now, and it's oblivious to most people because normalcy bias, That'll never happen here, and if it does happen, it won't be that bad. I mean, I've actually had people that told me, "Oh, well, if the currency collapses, it's no big deal. We'll just whip up another currency," and
Oh,
it's just,
crypto. I think crypto is going to take over.
well, it's a good possibility, but unfortunately, with the currency collapses that we've seen in the last 100 years, Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, there's all been one common thread that's kept the world together, and that is the fact that those countries, if you lived in those countries, if you were a Zimbabwean, you had an opportunity to move your Zimbabwean cash into dollars and thus save your money. It's going to be a totally different scenario when the United States dollar collapses.
You got to move it into precious metal here because you don't have another currency to fall back on.
Right, but I mean, is there enough precious metals? I mean, from what I'm understanding, nowhere near. And then
Not if everybody did it at the same time, but since there's three of us.
right. Well, and again, let me remind everybody listening that if you do get into precious metals, you want something that you can hold, okay? Because just like with the gold traders of yore, they will definitely give you slips of paper that say that you have 300 ounces of gold in their vault. However, on collection day, when you go to collect, you'll find there's nothing there but lint. So if you do want to get into precious metals and stuff like that, I do encourage you to hold it on site or somewhere close by.
Gotta be physical.
Right. If it's not in your hand, you don't actually own it. A lot of Bernie Madoff's clients figured that out the hard way. It's nice to get a letter every month saying that you're a millionaire, and then when you go to try to pull out the $1 million, there's nothing there but air. So,
I would suspect depositors are going to be the first people to lose access to their money.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people keep their money in the bank. So again, this is going to be real hard times for a lot of people, but I wasn't even finished on the aspect of the collapse of the dollar. What we have to realize is that every country keeps dollars as a reserve in order to buy oil. Okay?
Right.
So right now, as it stands, last time I looked, the reserve currency in most countries of dollars is about 60%. Okay. So when Venezuelan bombed and their currency bombed, they could switch it over to dollars and be relatively safe there. But when the United States dollar bombs, all the countries' currencies bomb. Okay. Because in their wallet, 60% of it is dollars. Okay. So if I take 60% out of everybody in the world's wallet, we're all broke. So the collapse of the United States currency is going to look totally different than any other collapse that we've seen to date.
I would suspect there's going to be hyperinflation to the equivalent of that of Zimbabwe, and it's going to be a result of the bailout on the U.S. dollar. People are going to bail out of their investments, and the people that we owe our debt to are going to want to cash in now, and you've got 30 days or blah, blah, blah. And there's going to be a massive global bailout on U.S. bucks, and that's what's going to trigger the final nail in the coffin, if you will. And I think it's fair and plausible to suggest that this is a very convenient vehicle to demonize, given our climate and education and social politics, political politics, the general view of religion in this country, the racial the divisions, the economic differences, the gender, the sex, the race, everything that divides us all that stuff's working against us, and it's gonna prevent us from seeing what's really going on, and we're going to be told that it's capitalism and the original system of our founding that is unjust, and the greedy, I hate to say, old rich white man is out to get you. You know, the boogeyman is the white people, and the education of the white man is why certain people think a certain way. And my fellow dark skinned descendant, if you will, is Uncle Tom, because he's prescribed and subscribed to the worldview and outlook of Donald Trump or Ron Paul or actually I can't think of any other two good people aside from John Kennedy. Uh, there's just so much shit going on. It's going to be a way for them to hit the reset button when they say this decline, this chaos is all a result of capitalism and freedom and independence. They're going to say the only way out of this mess, the only way out of what they actually engineered, unbeknownst to most people, is we centralize this stuff. We build communities. They embrace Marxism and socialism and government dependence. People will be dependent upon the state and will be left ultimately with, you can't get food unless you're getting it from a government regulated sort of entity. There won't be grocery stores. There won't be jobs for people unless the state has a job for people. There won't be, thinking about catching rainwater will be something like a myth, a thing of the past. That level of independence will be something that's not even sought out as a goal. People will be scrapping and struggling for just the basics because their money's going to be gone, and perhaps their guns might be gone, and perhaps perhaps hunting will be outlawed before the fiat currency collapses as it's engineered to do. And it has happened in every single case around the world, all throughout history, all the way back to Napoleon, in every single economy, where the private central banks, the bankers, the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, the Fords, and this is not a Jewish cabal. A lot of people think that the Jews are orchestrating this whole thing. The Jews are victims in all of this too, folks. And that's a whole nother discussion, but I digress. My wife's giving me the look. I think I should stop. I'll give it to John Filax. We haven't heard much from John Filax. Mr. Majorly Awesome has done a enormous review of this. My wife would like to have a moment to make a comment, and then we're going to give it over to Mr. Filax. I'm sure he's anxious, and I'm sure the viewers here are anxious to hear from him. So without further ado.
My only comment is about currency. It's just what people assign to it as a society, and it's what we've all decided. This is what this represents. That was my only comment. And John Filax, you have the floor, sir.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have a lot of words today for some reason, but you guys are saying a lot of stuff, and it's all very big picture stuff.
Ambitious.
I wouldn't know how to tackle. For instance, I went to a city council meeting in a small town I used to live in called Frostproof, and I wanted to get the Patriot Act repealed. Like, they're like, what in the F are you even talking about? You know what I mean?
Yes, this is a very great way to. This is a great topic. This is a great way to articulate your position. I'm a bit familiar with this, so I think it's going to be very valuable for our listeners and audience tonight to hear what you have to say.
Well, I mean, I went there a couple times, but I could go to my local city council meeting and try to get the Patriot Act repealed every week for the rest of my life, and nothing is going to happen. But what I'm thinking is, let's say you want to strike down some stupid ordinances in the city. You just start chopping away at one ordinance after another till the people who want those positions of power, because they don't pay very much, so they just want to be in control of things, till we can run them kind of people out of there. If I'm not mistaken, one of the founders said, you have a republic if you can keep it. And the problem is that people don't know what it means to keep the republic anymore.
Precisely. Well said.
It takes work. It takes action. It takes work. It takes, first of all, my main things with the police is the ID thing. The Fourth Amendment's by far one of the most important things we have. So when you hand over that plastic card, when you hand it over, or you think you're supposed to give your private details up, that pisses me the hell off. And when police expect you to give up your Fourth Amendment so willingly, that pisses me the hell off. And I would like that idea that we're supposed to surrender our rights to a cop when they ask for ID. I want people to understand, learn that that's something that you should be pissed about, not willingly doing. That's about it, man. I'm drinking lemonade.
Newman's?
And I had some oyster mushrooms I grew myself earlier. They're pretty delicious.
We saw your mushroom video, man. It's nice to see you mixing it up a little bit. It's cool, you know. I'm thinking about doing some homemade food recipes, you know, things that go back to my Italian and Irish grandparents and things like that. Throw them up into the mix every now and then, so it's not always so snerious, you know what I mean? It's good to be able to connect with the people on a different level.
Gotta break
every
it
now
up,
and
man,
then,
or else
and
it'll go crazy.
offer just some things for fun.
If you don't break it up, you go a little crazy. I can't just do, here's another bad cop, here's another bad cop, here's another bad cop, here's another bad cop.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It could actually burn an individual out. It's essentially what the mainstream media does. And we certainly do not want to behave in any manner of which that could be misconstrued as indicative of them, you know, of those entities. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, this is John Filax. He's got a phenomenal channel. I did throw a link up into his YouTube page. He is an active member of ANN. He is a phenomenal government accountability activist. And what he does on a regular with his day-to-day documenting and creating adjective record of his encounters with his state and local officials is not just is not at all a selfish act. It's a very selfless act, and he does it just as much for the sake of his family and the future of this country as he's doing it for you and yours. So I would encourage each and every one of you that's here right now that is listening in to head on over to John Filax's channel, show him the love if you have not done so already. Unfortunately, I suspect most of you here already know him.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody, man.
Yeah, you know,
If
you're a
it's
great
5
mind.
or 5 million.
You're a great mind, and so is Major Lee here. You know, we've got a great group of people around the nation really trying to become an organized force for progress, and I think that's what the people have lacked more than anything. I think the people working against this country are able to organize and collectivize themselves, you know, come together for their rather sinister and nefarious agendas. And despite our knowledge of all of this stuff, our major problem, our primary problem, I think, is we don't actually do anything to organize. Like, sure, we can talk to each other, we could do podcasts, we can get on YouTube Live. You know, like, it's nice that
There's not
we're
enough
taking
of us
things.
yet.
It's nice to It's nice, just like talk radio on the AM dial. What I mean, Michael Savage has been on the air for 20-something years. You got Rush Limbaugh. You got conservative talk radio. You have controversial stuff. You can contrast it with NPR. You got taxpayer-funded stuff, and then you got like the local stations with their radical left-wing guys promoting all sorts of things. You know, like, sure, there's some balance there, and sure, there's all this stuff. But what does it amount to? Nothing. It gives the people an outlet.
Noise.
It gives people an outlet, right? And because they feel better after what they heard, they don't take it any further. You know, no one's taking it to the next level. I think Activism News Network is going to help facilitate that vehicle. I think it's you know, essential of each and every one of us as a member to really take advantage of this and take it as serious as a position of public office. You know, so that we can really give it all we got and try to do something with it. And from there, we can create another workable, toolbox of tools that we can use to go further and continue to evolve and actually get the people to unite, become a force for progress, and really make some real changes rather than just talking about them. Like, it starts with a conversation, and I'm glad to have each of you aboard. And I'd like to hear what Rogue has to say. Let's talk solutions. It started with the 10th Amendment tonight, you guys, and we're trying to keep every bit of this relevant to that and our relationship with the state's relationship with the federal government. In fact, I'd actually like to raise something that I think is quite interesting. Abraham Lincoln is often referred to as one of the greatest presidents of the United States, and Barack Obama was often, quoted as, quoted saying Abraham Lincoln is one of my favorites. With that said, if any of you are familiar with the Gettysburg Address, and what I believe is its relativity to the 10th Amendment, where the federal government essentially, hijacked the powers of the people and took control over the country unfairly. It's like the federal government became king in 1812. Is it? Oh, I'm sorry. I might have the wrong date there. When did Abraham Lincoln make this? Okay, all right. Well,
it was in the 1860s, but
I have a microphone problem, so I'm going to shut my mic off and figure out what's going on. If Major Lee or John Felix can kind of jump in and pick up where
I can pick up where you left off there. Basically, and what happened is after the Civil War, some of the southern states wouldn't pass the I want to say it's the 14th Amendment. And what happened was basically is the federal government put the southern states under Reconstruction, and part of the, I guess, qualifications to get back into the Union was the ratification of the 14th Amendment. Pretty sure it was the 14th. It could have been the 13th, but I'm pretty sure it was the 14th. And if you look at that time frame, when Reconstruction was started and where it was started in every southern state except for one. And the reason it wasn't started in that state was because they had already ratified that amendment. So it's kind of a clue there that we're looking at. But I wanted to expound on what Tyrant Slayer was saying about organization and about Activism News Network, and where I see it coming in as part of a solution. And we've heard that we've had a hard time organizing. Part of the reason why that is the same reason why it's hard for an alcoholic to find help. And that is because the alcoholic doesn't realize he has a problem. And here in America, a lot of people don't realize we have a problem. And it's even actually worse than that. What happens is in this country, we only have a problem when it's not our guy in office. Okay? When our guy's in office, nothing's wrong. There's no scandals. There's no backdoor deals. The government's totally trustworthy, except those parts of the government's ran by the other guy, or whatever cities ran by the other guys, or whatever have you not. But it's part of that two-way split. Okay, and I've watched it through many presidential elections. When Bush was in office, he was the Antichrist, and he was going to implement martial law so that he wouldn't have to leave office. And when Obama won, he was the Antichrist, and he was going to implement martial law and
the end of the Posse Comitatus Act.
Right, and then Trump got in office, and he's the Antichrist, and He's not going to leave office. And, we hear this stuff over and over and over again each election. The only thing that changes is who's saying it. Right, is who's saying it. Okay, when Clinton was in
Policy
office,
always remains.
yeah, when Clinton was in office, it was the Republicans that were saying, "Oh, the government can't be trusted, and we got to do all these investigations." And then when Bush got in office, well, the Republicans, well, everything was cool. Bush was great, and there's no scandals, and he was a great president. And all the Democrats were like, "Oh, the government can't be trusted, and we need investigations." And it goes back and forth and back and forth, and you can see it if you're not politically motivated one way or another, you can sit back and you can watch all this unfold.
Right.
And
If you're not affiliated with a party, you can't even vote during the primaries. Yeah, you can't even, because you're not party affiliated, so you can't even come out and say who you support because you're not affiliated with the party that they're being supported by.
Exactly. Everything is set up to divide us.
You got it. Whether it's economically, religiously, sexually, by the color of our skin,
everything.
Our weight, our height. Everybody's got an instinctual kind of degree of prejudice. Everybody's got a built-in facial recognition. I'm sure we've all, at one point in our life, one time or another, been walking down the street in the city or in the valley or wherever you might be, and seen someone walking towards you, and you just, you get the instinct that, this one's gonna ask me for money or a cigarette, or I'd rather cross the street than to than engage this guy. And now we're living in a time where, like, those are the people being hired for TSA security. They're becoming police officers and beating the shit out of people like James Freeman.
Right, absolutely. So I mean, where we come in at, where Activism News Network comes in at, hopefully, is our educational workshops. And again, part of the problem we're having with organizing is that people don't realize that there's a problem. And again, unless it's their party not in power, then there's a problem.
Well,
but
I
it's
agree with
usually
that to a degree, but I would think that a lot of us are aware of the problem. We have an outlet on talk radio and on avenues like this where people kind of get satisfied, I'm basically trying to say, like, I don't think the folks that listen and tune into this stuff should become complicit in what they're hearing here and expect that we're doing something about it ourselves. Like, our listeners in this audience and the members of Activism News Network, the audience there that's subscribed and supporting us, they need to be active with us. They're the ones that should consider, and we are the ones that should consider running for local office and setting the precedents for the change. I just feel like a lot of people are aware, and even with our awareness, we're not actually organizing anything. The other side of which we're competing against and trying to overcome, they're so good at organizing things. They've got front groups. They've got corruption on their side. They've got
endless money,
a means to launder money, and a means to use tax dollars against us. And when we find out about this stuff, they pay their lawyers with their tax dollars too. Like, so it's like there is a mountain of stuff stacked against us. I get a strong sense that John Filax is very aware of that sort of element, and he kind of feels like any sort of legitimate sort of actions we take confined within the restraints of the system that's already so corrupted would be fruitless. I understand what he's saying, but I think it's going to change if perhaps John Filax gets elected to local office, and I get elected to local office, and my wife does, and the kids that I named after the Kennedys, with the exception of Ted Kennedy because he was a black piece of shit.
If I ran for office, If I ran for office, they would spend tens of thousands of dollars demonizing me, run commercials
Activism
against
News Network
me.
has a tremendous value in the sense that it's the I think single resource available to the people that's brand new and fresh out of the gate, that has the potential, given its foundation of people from all around the country, from all walks of life, with the same common goals and the influence to share what they're doing with each other, with the rest of the people around them. It makes me physically tremble to think that we can actually be successful, and that my kids, when I die, when I'm dying, I want to know that I did everything I could for my kids, and that the future is going to be the best that it could be. And I did everything I could so that I can leave here peacefully and feel secure, And I'm sure each and every parent out there wants to feel that too. And I'm sure that people who really value America want to preserve it. And they're not going along with this status quo here. I think ANN is going to be and can be and will be, with the support of this audience and that of John Filax, Rogue Nation, Chuck Bronson, Joe Cool, Acura, Amanda, Solo Yacker, Eyes on the State, everybody. We've got 22 members here, and we're not just members, and we're not just a part of Activism News Network. We're a part of America, and we're doing something to try and stop what we can see coming. And, we just got to keep plugging away at it, man. And,
That's it.
I think if we do that, we can win. There's a great sense in my heart that tells me we can win. We're doing the right thing, and we're going to win. Good will prevail over evil. We just got to keep working hard at it, and we will organize something. We will be able to utilize a nonprofit 501c3 and raise funds nationwide and not have any problems doing it, and do everything legally by the book and win. It's a little scary to think that Donald Trump, elected to make a deal with the Republican Party just to try and win his election, because he knew that he couldn't win as a third-party candidate or as an independent because the system is so stacked against the people. So that's discouraging. But I'm sure with our talented minds and the support of the people, each and every one of us can collectively find a viable means to work against and effectively and successfully against the status quo and get
Gentlemen,
people elected into real positions of power.
sorry to cut you off, man. Thank you for having me. I have to go, okay?
Well, that's a shame. I'm terribly sorry to hear that, but you're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, my pleasure, man. I'll do it next time, okay?
Thanks,
Right
John.
on, right on. Be well, be swell, my
Thanks.
friend. Ladies and gentlemen.
Take it easy, gentlemen. Have a good day.
With that, I'll give the floor to Rogue. Rogue, if you'd like to add anything, if there's anyone that has any questions, I'll try to get them up on screen. I think we're going to run this for about another 10 minutes or so.
I was going to say I got to take off here in just a minute as well, but I am going live here in just a couple of minutes to talk with my subscribers. I've been gone on vacation for a while, and I'm going to be catching everybody up, but I do have some exciting announcements to make about Activism News Network. So hopefully we'll see you guys over there.
Yeah, please, everybody get on over to Rogue Nation's channel.
Yeah, I'll be up here probably another 10 minutes or so. But I just wanted to say that I think, once we can get an educational base for the people in society, so they can look and see the problems that we see, we'll have a much easier time being organized, getting organized. As it stands now, posting our videos on YouTube to people that like our videos gives us a false sense of thinking that there's a lot of people out there that know there's a problem, when in actuality there's not. You post your video on Facebook and you quickly realize how many people out there are just complete and mindless sheep and don't think there's a problem and fight. I mean, almost fight to the death to prove to you that there's no problem. It's just like, again, the people when I tell people that banks don't loan money, they fight that information. They fight against it. They bring out mortgage notes and car notes, and they tell me how the bank has loaned them money on personal occasions multiple times. And it doesn't matter to them that I have the book put out by the bank that tells them in black and white we don't loan money. Okay, it doesn't matter that I've got that information in front of them right there, because again, that their mind can't accept that. And again, it's an education thing. We've got our minds filled up with garbage that the government has put in there, and we're trying to tell people, hey, this is garbage. But unfortunately, the mind doesn't work that way. When, it's the backfire effect. If you tell someone that their beliefs are garbage, they're just going to believe them more.
Yeah,
So
instinctually they take a defensive posture, and you're going to have a disconnect right away.
exactly. And that's what
Nobody
we
wants to feel stupid.
Right, exactly. No one wants to look in the mirror and say, well, all the problems I've had in my life are basically because I've just been a mentally lazy idiot and I've
Exactly.
taken people's words for shit,
It's the biggest crow they would ever have to swallow in their life. And when you include things like pride and the false sense of confidence and security, people just are not willing to surrender their beliefs and consider the facts sometimes, because it would tremendously change their worldview. And they're
Absolutely.
just not willing to do that. People are instinctually not inclined to change. People don't like to change.
Right. They don't like to get out of that comfort zone. And again, for a lot of people, these are beliefs that they've held, their whole life. We could see it easily with, religious zealots, or, there's been studies done of people that have been in love, and, how the brain shuts off when you care about somebody.
Right. There's passes. The boundary line moves. The goalpost moves. It's different. I understand exactly where you're going. There's based on the mindset of the individual. If it's their president, if it's their side versus the opposing side, if it's their, my kid would never do that. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. So it's hard for people to understand that. Just like, when two people are in love and one spouse cheats on the other, if people are being honest with themselves, the first reaction they have is disbelief. I can't believe this happened. I can't believe she would do that. I can't believe he would do that. Okay. And the reason why that is because your brain is fighting against that information. Your brain believes that this person loves you and cares about you, so it can't wrap itself around the concept of being, tossed aside or whatever and such. So I really think education is the key for not only people learning new things, but to learning the right things. I had a conversation with somebody earlier, and they told me that intelligence was the depth of the cup, and knowledge was what you filled the cup up with. And I said, well, what happens if you fill up your cup with false knowledge? You know?
Right. Then you're just
So
living in a life of illusion. You're just you're a victim. And unfortunately, that's what the duopoly has created in the United States. And I think the center power behind it is the banking system. This is how the central bankers and the rich families of the world have overthrown all of the countries and economies around us. And I truly, from what I see, it seems the United States and Russia are the only two nation states unwilling to participate and surrender their sovereignty completely to the international agenda. They're not globalists, and that's why they seem to be the focus of the crosshairs of all the powers that be that are invested in keeping us in this illusion, propping up the duopoly and the deceptive narratives that keep us divided, and maintaining their big financial orgy, if you will. This is just a means for the rich people to feel secure I mean, like, when you have so much money and you can buy any, like, you can have any lifestyle or material possession in the world. I mean, you're going to get bored. Imagine like what a person to that degree of wealth would do to keep themselves occupied as a living human being that's getting bored. Like, they're going to want control. They're going to want power. They're going to want They're going to want influence over what's happening and try to impose their philosophies, ideas, outlooks, worldview upon other people so that they can feel a certain way about themselves. I just feel like what's the quote? Power corrupts absolutely.
That's right. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Dean, I'm going to be going live on my platform, Rogue Nation. You can click my name.
Yeah,
Or
I'm going
just
to end the stream, and we're all going to head on over to your channel. I'd like each and every one of my viewers to go ahead and join you. I believe that's the link to your channel right there in the live chat. I put it up a couple times. I would hope that everybody joins us over there. I'm definitely interested in hearing the news, so I will see you very shortly, and I do sincerely appreciate you coming out this evening.
Sure. Thank you for having me, buddy. Like I said, I'll be live probably in 10 minutes or less.
Most excellent, my brother. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogue Nation, ladies and gentlemen. That is Mr. Majorly Awesome, aka Rogue Nation. You can get a link to his channel right here in the live stream. I believe I put it up there. I'll put it up one more time right there for all of you to see. That's probably not good enough because you can't copy it from there. So I'll go ahead and be a nerd and straight pal surprise. There you go, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was enlightening, inspiring, educational, and everything it needs to be to make a difference in this country, because I've got 5 kids, and if this shit don't work out, I might come back from the dead and just fix things myself. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Be well, be swell. Tyrant Slayer Studios out.